Gaming used to feel different. Not better, just different. And I know that sounds like nostalgia talking. Every generation thinks the things they grew up with were better. The music was better, the movies were better, the games were better, but I don't think nostalgia really explains this. Because gaming's never been bigger than it is now. The worlds are larger, the graphics are better. We can play with anybody around the world. We've got crossplay, cloud saves, Game Pass, Steam, and Discord, and more games than most of us can finish in our lifetime or several lifetimes. So why does it feel like something's missing? Maybe you felt it too. You buy a new game, you play it for a few nights, and even if the game's good, something about the experience just doesn't hit the way it used to. You go back to an old favorite, hoping it'll bring that feeling back. Sometimes it works for a little while, but it never feels exactly the same. So we blame the games. We blame the unfinished releases, the microtransactions, the battle passes, live service design, matchmaking, the industry. And to be fair, a lot of those complaints are legit. But I don't think that explains the whole thing either. Because if somebody released the perfect game tomorrow, it has no bugs, no battle pass, no microtransactions, everything we claim we want, I'm still not convinced it would bring back what we're actually missing. I think we've been looking for the answer inside the games, but I don't think the games are where we left it. Before Xbox Live, before Party Chat, before Discord, before everybody had a phone in their pocket, playing with your friends required a little more effort. In my house, there was one phone. It hung in the kitchen, and most of the time when it rang, somebody was calling to talk to my mom. So when she yelled, "Logan, phone!" I remember who in the world was calling me. Nobody called me. They called the house, but this time it was one of my friends. He wanted to know if I could come over, and that was it. That was the entire plan. There was no group chat, no calendar invite. There wasn't a 30-minute conversation about what everybody wanted to play. I didn't need to know which games he had or how long we had to play them. Somebody wanted me there. And as an only child at the time, that could change my entire day. I was probably thinking about GoldenEye or Smash Brothers or a WCW wrestling game. But looking back, I don't think it was the game that got me excited. I was excited because someone wanted to spend an afternoon with me. The game gave us something to do, but the invitation was the thing that mattered. If this is already making you think of somebody, though, hit the like button. It'll let me know I'm not the only one who remembers gaming this way. And I didn't realize it then, but that phone call was part of the experience too. The waiting, the anticipation, the bike ride over, that feeling that the day could become something. These days, we can reach anybody instantly. We removed all that friction. And that should make gaming feel more connected than ever. And for a while, I think it did. But before gaming connected us across the world, it gave us a reason to be in the same room. And being in the same room changed everything. One of my friends lived across the railroad tracks in this old two-story house. He had a brother, and they were both on some of the sports teams I played on. Their house became one of those places where people just naturally ended up. You didn't need a detailed plan. You just showed up and maybe we'd start playing outside. Maybe somebody had a basketball. Maybe we rode our bikes around town until we got bored. But eventually somebody turned on the console. And once that happened, the rest of the day took care of itself. Maybe it was a racing game. Maybe it was wrestling. Maybe it was something super competitive, enough to start an argument, or ridiculous enough to make everybody laugh. Whatever was sitting next to the TV became the game everybody cared about. We weren't comparing reviews, we weren't checking player counts, we didn't need a roadmap showing us the content that was coming up next season. We had four controllers and a room full of people, and an argument over who got to pick first. That was enough. Of course, there were rules, some of them spoken, some of them understood. Nobody got to choose odd job. Screen peeking was cheating, unless you were the one doing it. And if somebody lost, there was always a reason. The controller was messed up, they got distracted, somebody blocked the screen, the game cheated. Nobody ever simply lost, but the competition was only part of it. The best moments usually had nothing to do with who won. It was somebody missing an easy jump in Tony Hawk, a perfectly timed blue shell in Mario Kart, a wrestling match that stopped looking like wrestling about 30 seconds after it started. One person would start laughing, and then everybody would lose it. That's the part you can't recreate alone. The excitement moved around the room. We fed off each other. A game could be average and still be the greatest thing we'd ever played because the right people were sitting beside us. And when we got hungry, there was always something nearby. Doritos and Mountain Dew, or Surge if somebody's parents made a bad decision, sometimes Pizza Hut, and somewhere along the way, those friends introduced me to dipping pizza in ranch, a decision that probably shortened my life, but improved it considerably. We stayed up later than we were supposed to. The room slowly got quieter. Somebody kept playing. Somebody else watched from the floor. Eventually, people fell asleep wherever they happened to be sitting. But before that, the controllers had to be put away. And everybody had their own method. Some people carefully wrapped the cord around the controller. Others tied it in a knot that would take the next person 20 minutes to undo. It didn't feel important. None of it did. It was just a normal afternoon, a normal sleepover, a normal weekend. And that might be why the memories became so powerful. We weren't trying to make a perfect gaming experience. We weren't even trying to make a memory at all. We were just together long enough for one to happen. That's hard to explain now because gaming is more social than it has ever been. We can talk to our friends without leaving the house. We can play with people across the country and across the world. We don't need four controllers, one television, or parents willing to drive us somewhere. Technically, we're more connected now, but connection and proximity aren't exactly the same. When everybody was in one room, the game didn't have to carry the entire experience. The room did some of the work. The jokes, the arguments, the food, the waiting your turn, even watching somebody else play. The game was at the center of the day, but the day was bigger than the game. And sometimes that excitement started before we even pressed start. All it took was seeing a game box on a shelf and wondering whether this might be the one we would spend the whole weekend talking about. In my town, we didn't have a blockbuster with endless rows of games. We had a little mom and pop rental shop in an old downtown strip. The kind of place where the shelves had dust older than you. Most of the store was movies, rows and rows of VHS tapes packed into shallow shelves. And for some reason, the horror section always seemed to be placed exactly eye level for children. I don't know. I can still picture those leprechaun covers. I didn't want to rent them. I didn't even want to look at them. But I looked every single time. The games had a much smaller section, maybe a couple of shelves, that was it. You could see almost everything they had within a few minutes. But that didn't make choosing easy. It made every choice feel important. There were no trailers playing beside the box, no 10-minute review waiting in your pocket, no user score, no Reddit thread telling you whether the game was good or not after the first 15 hours. You had the cover, you had a few screenshots on the back, maybe a description that made every game sound like the greatest adventure ever created, and your own imagination had to fill in everything else. You would pick a box up to study it, turn it over, read every word, look at each screenshot like it contained classified information. Sometimes you recognize the characters, sometimes you heard everybody at school mention the game, and sometimes the cover just looked cool. And that was enough. You carried it to the counter hoping the actual cartridge was still available, because finding the perfect game only to discover somebody else had already rented it felt like a personal attack. Then came the ride home. The game was sitting beside you, still inside the case. You hadn't played a single second yet, and somehow the experience had already started. You were imagining what the game would be, what the first level would look like, whether your friends would like it, whether you just discovered something that everybody would talk about on Monday. And by the time you got home, expectations were dangerously high. Then you opened the case, put in the cartridge, turned on the console, and sometimes nothing happened. So you take it back out, blow in it, put it back in, still nothing. Then came the more advanced repair techniques, blowing harder, wiping it on your shirt, smacking the cartridge against your hand as though intimidation might improve the connection. Eventually, the screen came to life. And whether the game was actually good almost didn't matter at first. You had chosen it, you had waited for it, for that weekend, it was yours. That limitation gave the game a chance. You couldn't immediately uninstall it and replace it with one or 200 other options. You couldn't jump back into the store from your couch. You had already made the trip. The rental fee had already been paid. So you played. You learned the controls. You pushed through the confusing beginning. You gave the game time to become something. And sometimes it did. Sometimes it absolutely did not. But even the bad rentals became stories. The broken games, the impossible games, the games that looked incredible on the box and played like they'd just been designed for somebody's lunch break. You still remember them because everybody experienced the disappointment together. That was the strange thing about scarcity. It didn't give us better games, it gave the games room to matter. We weren't choosing from everything, we were choosing from what was available. And once the choice was made, we had to live with it for a while. Today, nearly every barrier between wanting a game and playing it has disappeared. You can discover one, buy it, download it, and abandon it without ever leaving the couch. That convenience is incredible, don't get me wrong. I would not honestly choose to go back to hoping a scratch rental would work. But when we took away the waiting, the searching, the commitment, we may have removed part of the anticipation too. The game used to begin long before the title screen. And for a while, technology seemed capable of giving us the best of both worlds, the excitement of playing together without needing to be in the same room. Then one console generation changed what it meant to have a friend waiting on the other side of the screen. Xbox Live didn't ruin anything. At first, it felt like magic. All of a sudden, your friends didn't need to be sitting beside you. They didn't even need to live nearby. You could turn on the console, put on a headset, and hear somebody you knew waiting on the other side. No bike rides, no ride from your parents, no call to the house, no hoping everybody could meet in the same place at the same time. Gaming had found a way around distance. And for people like me, that mattered. I moved around enough growing up that eventually I got tired of making friends just to lose them. By high school, I had become quiet, almost painfully quiet. But gaming gave me another way in. You didn't always need to know what to say. You could load into a match, help the team, laugh when something went wrong, let the game carry the first few minutes until talking became easier. Sometimes the friendship came later. Sometimes it didn't at all. Either way, for a little while, you weren't alone. When I first went to college, I didn't even own an Xbox. But I played more Halo then than I probably had ever before. The campus network worked like one enormous LAN. You weren't necessarily connecting with people across the world. Sometimes you were connecting with somebody 2 floors above you. You could hear the matches happening through the walls. Somebody shouting after a bad death. A room erupting because one player had pulled off something ridiculous. No headset required. The building itself became the party chat. Sometimes we played one on one on the same TV. Sometimes there were matches running across the dorm. And there was always one person who seemed to know things that the rest of us didn't. The hidden routes, the grenade jumps, the strange little tricks that made you wonder if they ever went to a class. The best player I met showed me some of those tricks. We played, we talked, and afterward I invited him to go fishing the next morning. That still sticks with me. A game gave two people who barely knew each other something easy to share. Then, almost without either of us noticing, that connection moved beyond the game. That was the promise of online gaming. The screen stopped being a wall. It became a doorway, and gaming communities grew around that doorway. Friends stayed connected after moving away. People found teammates they never would have met otherwise. Some found entire groups where they finally felt like they belonged. Online gaming didn't make friendship less real. For a lot of people, it made friendship possible, but it also changed the shape of the experience. When your friends were in the same room, being together was the event. The game was part of it. Online, the game slowly became the meeting place itself. That wasn't worse, it was just different. The laughter still happened, the competition was still real, the late nights still disappeared faster than they should have. But now, when the console turned off, the room went quiet immediately. Nobody was asleep on the floor. Nobody was digging in through the kitchen for snacks. Nobody was still sitting beside you replaying the best moment from the last match. The connection ended when the headset came off. At least, that's how it sometimes felt. Over time, the technology became even better with party chat, matchmaking, crossplay, Discord, and phones that kept every friend one message away. We gained more ways to stay connected than we had ever imagined. And yet somehow getting everybody together became harder. Not technically harder, life harder. Work schedules, relationships, children, distance, exhaustion. One person was free on Friday, another could play Saturday morning. Someone else had already promised that time to their family. The friend list was full, the party was empty. That's the part I don't think we talk about enough. Gaming solved the problem of distance, but it couldn't solve the problem of adulthood. We lived through the greatest expansion of multiplayer gaming, and at the same time, the greatest contraction of shared free time. The technology kept improving, our lives stopped lining up. And maybe that's why the old games feel so powerful when we remember them. Not because the matchmaking was better, not because the graphics were worse, not because couch co op was some perfect form of gaming that should have never been replaced. Maybe we remember those games so clearly because everyone we wanted was still available at the same time. The games didn't disappear, the people didn't necessarily disappear either. But the conditions that made those afternoons feel effortless did. And I think that's what gaming used to feel different really means. We didn't just have more time, we had shared time. Time that belonged to nobody yet. No work schedule, no errands, no bills, no calendar that needed three people to compare before anyone could agree on a night. An afternoon could simply happen. You could call somebody, ride your bike over, turn on a console, and stay until somebody's parents said it was time to go home. There was nothing remarkable about it while it was happening. That might be the most important part. We didn't know the weekends were limited. We didn't know the people in the room would eventually move away, that schedules would stop lining up, that friendships would fade quietly without any final conversation, that one day hearing a familiar menu theme could bring back an entire house, a room, a smell, a voice, a version of yourself you hadn't thought about in years. That's why going back to an old game can feel so strange. The game is still there, the title screen looks the same, the music starts in exactly the same place. You may even remember the controls before the tutorial tells you what to do. But the room around is different. You are different. The people who made the game feel alive may not still be sitting beside you anymore. So the feeling returns, but only for a second. Just long enough for you to recognize it, not long enough to stay. That doesn't mean modern gaming is empty. It doesn't even mean the best years are behind us. And it definitely doesn't mean we should spend the rest of our lives trying to recreate childhood exactly as it was. We can't. But maybe we can understand what made those memories powerful in the first place. It wasn't the low resolution graphics, it wasn't the cartridge dust, it wasn't the tangled controller cords, it wasn't even the game. It was the anticipation and it was the presence. It was having nowhere else you needed to be, and it was knowing the people beside you were there for the same reason you were. And maybe that is the part worth carrying forward. Not the hardware, not the era, the intention. Calling someone instead of saying, we should play sometime. Picking a night instead of waiting for schedules to magically align. Sitting beside your kids while they play instead of only handing them the controller. Letting the game become the reason everybody stays in the room a little longer. We're still capable of making those memories. They just don't happen as effortlessly anymore. Now we have to choose them. If I could go back to one of those ordinary afternoons, I don't think I would care what game we played, whether it was GoldenEye, Mario Kart, Smash Bros, just some terrible rental that barely worked. It wouldn't matter. I would want the room. I would want the noise, the pizza, the arguments, the feeling that there was nowhere else I needed to be. And I would want to hear my mom call from the kitchen one more time. I would answer a little faster. I would stay in the moment a little longer. I would definitely hug her before I left. Because now I understand something that I just couldn't understand then. Those afternoons felt ordinary because we thought there would always be another one. There wasn't. But that doesn't make the memory sad. It makes them valuable. Gaming used to feel different because our lives were different. The games gave us a place to meet, the people gave that place meaning. And maybe the best part of gaming was never the games. Maybe it was those waiting to play them with us.